So in this video, we're going to start to explore the second information cost, and so that is facing the financial intermediaries. So that is called moral hazard. So as I mentioned, the differences between adverse selection and moral hazard is when the transaction happened. So the adverse selection will occur before the transaction happened, and moral hazard will occur when the transaction after transaction happened. So to help you to understand this problem, what is called a moral hazard, and I want to introduce one of my favorite cartoon character called the Simpsons family. And so in this case, you can sense what is called a moral hazard, and so it's called a half-ass work ethic. So if you look at fact number 5, the financial system is among the most heavily regulated sector of the economy. Like I said, we need the government to help us to review the performance of the manager so that we can reduce the negative impact from the principal agent problem. And the third potential method can use to solve the principal agent problem is called the financial intermediaries. And so, for instance, like we have the venture capital firm. So I don't know if you heard about venture capital firm. So if you don't, and I can show you a short video so that you understand what is the venture capital firms.
You see, our main concern is how you're going to achieve escape velocity on your growth rate. Get critical mass. I'm sorry. What's funny?
It's just that painting behind you. It's awful. Looks like Harlequin Kama Sutra done poorly. So, I agree. Bad culture fit. I think we just all move on.
Look, I didn't say anything about a culture fit.
No, I did. Okay, well, thank you for meeting with us. We have a bunch of these things to go to, hopefully with more tasteful artwork. And your logo looks like a sideways vagina. I find that to be racist, don't you?
Okay, here's my concern.
Here's my concern. Who the hell picked out that shirt for you?
What?
Oh, I see. Pants. So I guess it's a whole thing.
My wife picked this out.
Then you married poorly.
Do you care about Pied Piper?
Do I care about Pied Piper? Well, of course.
Because if you do, I'm not seeing it. In fact, what I think I'm seeing is the human equivalent of a flaccid penis.
Flaccid. It's actually pronounced flaccid. Not a lot of people know that.
Well, we are definitely interested, but I think we need to. I'm sorry. Is something wrong?
No, this is all wrong. I am sensing a general lack of vision. Your muffins smell like shit. So do your ideas. One of you is the least attractive person I've ever seen. I'm not going to say who.
So I would just cut there because that actually pretty long. It's from the TV show called the Silicon Valley. So they basically talk about a lot of new tech startup, and then they try to start a business because they have a new idea about good stuff. And the problem for them is they don't have fun. They don't have money to start a business. They have idea. So it happened especially in the Silicon Valley area. So they have this kind of firm called a venture capital firm. So you can see those people, they go to every company to talking to the business owners. The reason is not they want to talk to them. They actually is acquiring money from those people so they can have a money pool so that they can use the money to start a business. So that's why they go to different companies to persuade them. So we have this kind of special firm called a venture capital firm. So they are looking at a good business and then they invest. They give them that startup money. So the benefit for them is they will own part of the company. They will own part of the company. And so this is considered as the financial intermediate. And so why is that? Because they are helping the people who need the money, start money, to find the funding source, and they will owning part of the company. And so this kind of financial intermediate will help to reduce the principal agent problem because they actually going to keep monitoring those startup company how they perform, make sure they invest money, the investors' money invest on the right place. So the key here is when you have this kind of venture capital firm, they're usually going to place the investor into the board of director of this kind of startup company so that they can have right to vote to resolve to minimize the harm from the principal agent problem. And so this is the third solution. So that's why you can see the fact number 3, which is talking about in a effective financial market, and you will see a lot of financial intermediaries play a very important role to supporting business to finding the funding source. It is really because this kind of financial intermediate did a great job to reducing the principal agent problem. And so the last method is using the debt contract. So pay attention on the debt contract and the equity contract. So the equity contract and the debt contract will be different because the claim profit in any situation. So the debt contract, usually what happens is when a corporation files bankruptcy, if you have the debt contract with the corporation, you got paid first. If you got equity contract, like you only own the stock from the company, so what happens is when the firm filed in bankruptcy, they will pay the debt who own the debt contract first. If they have extra money, then they will pay the equity contract. However, sometimes they just don't have any money left if after they pay the debt. So that means if you just have nothing out of it. So that's explain the fact number 1. And so so after we discuss the principal, the adverse selection on the equity market, which is called principal agent problem, now we move on to the debt market. So on the debt market, we also have the moral hazard. Why? So think about who is more likely to borrow the money. So the borrower have incentive to take on projects that are riskier than the lender would like. Because once you got money, and you can basically do whatever you want. So usually on the financial market, you understand the high risk usually indicating the relatively higher return, and because they have to compensate on the risk you are taking. But for the people who borrow money, their goal is to try to, I just want to get my principal back. Hopefully I can get a good, decent amount of interest. But without any regulation, once your money is in other people's pocket, they can do anything they want because they can file bankruptcy and they're not paying you back. So that's why it's also existing on the debt market. The moral hazard also existing on the debt market. And so this thing without any regulation, because the moral hazard existing on the debt market, so this prevent the borrower from paying back the loan. So what will be the solution? So the solution for the moral hazard on the debt market will be net worth and collaterals. So usually when you borrow money, you have to put something down just in case you cannot pay the debt back, and people can take over this asset and sell it to minimize the loss. And so that's why if you borrow more money, they usually ask you to put a more valuable asset as your collaterals. If you borrow a small amount of money, so they want to ask you to put down the asset less valuable. And so make sure when you design the collateral, it is incentive compatible. And the second method is using the monitoring enforcement of the restrictive covenants. So which means you are using different kind of policy to discourage the undesirable behavior and using the encourage desirable behavior. So the credit score is a good method created by the third party. And so if you have the bad, you know that if you are not paying back, you have bankruptcy, you basically lose your credit. So your credit score will become very, very low. You have no chance to get any debt. So for the people who borrow money from you, since he understands the consequence, so usually he will treat your money nicer. So that is considered as discouraging undesirable behavior. And also if you look at credit score, when your credit score can go up, when you frequently pay your credit card, never missing any payment, so that your credit score can goes up. So that will become encouraging desirable behavior. So this is second method people can use to avoid a moral hazard. And the third is using the financial intermediaries. Again, we already for this two problem, asymmetric information and moral hazard in both debt and equity market, we all mentioned about financial intermediaries, and so that's why you can understand why when we look at 8 facts, the financial intermediary show up so many times, because that is the agent that can solve the big problem on the financial market. So this is the summary about what we learned, and the last thing we're going to look at is the very beginning. I talked about the apartments, so 2-bedroom apartments sold in New York City and in Shanghai, China, and why the Chinese people want to put all the money, why the Chinese housing is so important. If you think about it, it's a really bad situation we are having in China, because people need a place to stay. It's considered as a necessity good. However, we don't have a good financial market, so that's pushing people treating the house as an investment asset, and so that pushing the housing price up, and so that's actually torturing the people who are the middle class and the people below the middle class, and so that's really bad. So what is going to be the solution for that? So what's the solution is finding the main problem we have on the Chinese financial market. The Chinese financial market is basically run by the government, and we already explained the problem facing the government regulation is they won't be as efficient as the private market. If you threw everything to the financial intermediaries, so they will be able to achieve the scale of the economy and will be able to have the resource to hire expert. That won't be the case for the government. So that's why the Chinese leader is well aware of this challenge. So the government has announced that the state-owned banks are being put on the path to privatization. So they are basically looking at what Americans doing, what is Germany doing, look at the healthy, effective financial market, how they are performed. The reason we have a healthy, effective market is because we have a good system that allow the development of the financial intermediaries, and the government only play a role as a referee, the monitoring how the financial intermediary behave, but they never jump in as a player to play an important role to tell the bank what to do. Instead, they only settle the regulation to make sure they are work properly. So before we end this video, I want to talk about your the attendance check question, the discussion question. So can you find the real world, the example happen around you that can be identified as moral hazard or the adverse selection? So first of all, I want to share adverse selection example with you guys. So I think most of you guys have been to Florida, like Key West. You know, I love traveling, especially like buying the gift that made in local, so that I can bring back and share with my families and friends. And unfortunately, when I went to Florida, I tried to look at the local crafts, and it's so hard because what happened is everybody declare that the gift shop, whatever they have, is local. And then what I noticed that it actually is really rare to find something local, because I noticed that once I went to the first souvenir store, I said, oh wow, it's so cool. Everything like a beach, and I had a seashell, etc. I almost purchased it, and I went to the second gift shop. They said, I'm local. Everything are exactly the same as the first one. I go to the third one, exactly the same. Finally, I went to the fourth one. They forgot to take out a sticker from the gift. They said, made in China. I would say, seriously? And so why this is the adverse selection problem? So think about, if the product making local and compare the product made in China. So obviously the local product made in local will be relatively more expensive, right? And the product made in China will be cheaper. And so if the two products look very similar, and then if they pricing on the average price, and so what happened in the long term is the more expensive, good quality item will be disappeared and will be taken over by the unauthentic local product. So that's basically what I see. I go to every shop. They sell exactly the same thing. They all declare this is local, but actually they're all made in China. Get a little bit disappointed, but I'm so glad at the end I found a product that you only can buy in local. That is the art piece made in by the local, the paint. And so you actually usually buy directly from the painter, so you know that that's directly from the people who create it. That has to be local. So this is my experience about adverse selection. So in terms of moral hazard, And so I didn't experience I'm not the one who had the moral hazard problem. And but I was thinking about moral hazard when I rented that place. So everybody do be Airbnb, right? Airbnb. Just imagine if Airbnb doesn't have that rating system, rating about the owner, the renter. So if they don't have any system to rating the renter, so you basically just rent the house to a random person. So once they rent the house, usually the homeowner won't come to the house to check you out, right? So you own it, you rent for a day, so that whole day is yours. The house is yours. So you literally can do a lot of messy things in that, right? You can destroy this furniture, destroy that furniture, because once they lend it to you, the Airbnb rented out to you, you have full control. They don't have any control. So that's why for the Airbnb they're facing a lot of challenges because people hosting party in the house, and so that's why later Airbnb start to put on a regulation and ask you to put a deposit down. So remember we mentioned about to avoid minimize the the moral hazard problem, you can use a collateral. So usually they ask you to put a deposit down. So if you really trash the houses, they can just take over your deposits. But if without rating system, without deposit, they are facing a huge moral hazard problem because it happened after transaction because you already pay and they already give you the house as you stay there. They have no control on the house. So this is considered as a moral hazard. So I'm looking forward to read your post to let me know what's your experience on moral hazard and adverse selection. So that's the end of this chapter.